Hi everyone, thank you all for coming over to this room to attend our talk about Docker from development to production and about streamlining the continuous integration and continuous delivery process for the new BALR e-commerce application. Today we would like to share the experience and knowledge gained and the achievements we unlocked and the challenges we faced while rebuilding the BALR.com website as a future-proof modular e-commerce application. My name is Jesse van Muijden and I am head of IT at BALR. Alongside me here is Tom Imre, senior software developer at BALR, to answer any of your most in-depth questions about our technology. I will do my best to leave some time for questions at the end of the talk. BALR is a luxury lifestyle brand founded in 2013 by a team of professional football players and experienced businessmen. Together, they designed their very own fashion collection, which was initially sold online only. Since November last year, we also have a physical store in Kalverstraat. Pretty cool, you should check it out. And we have some technical work hanging in there on one of the big screens, like a runway application on life-size touchscreens. So, worthwhile checking that out sometime. The product catalog has evolved from the famous BALR Legends t-shirts to BALR Hex 1 sneakers, various Italian leather bags, the Samsung Gear S3 designed by BALR. Some of you may have seen the television commercial for it around Christmas. And even the BALR Rolex, if you can cough up about 15,000 euros. Since recently, there is also the ultra high-end BALR Black Label and also a sizable women's collection. We can definitely recommend you to experience the life of a BALR. How to achieve this? Well, you can connect with me on LinkedIn or send me an email, jesse@balr.com, with the message your t-shirt size to have a chance at winning one of the 5 BALR brand shirts like the one I'm wearing, made available exclusively for the attendees of this conference. So if you're interested, get in touch and we'll announce the winners somewhere after the conference. About a year ago, when Tom and I were pulled on board of Team BALR to build a new version of the website, there were certain requirements, of course, from the business and technical point of view. These requirements strongly influenced the way we set up our project. From the business point of view, the most important requirement was to give the new website a more luxurious look and feel to match the brand's identity. For a fast-growing company like BALR, scalability is also very important. Not just in terms of server capacity to handle peak traffic generated by our huge social media accounts, but also in terms of being able to keep adding features to keep providing the best possible experience for our customers all around the globe. In addition, the new application should form the foundation of BALR's online business for years to come. In other words, it should be future-proof. And of course, the stakeholders wanted to keep as many features from the existing web shop as possible. And it should be easy to integrate third-party software, providing watertight inventory management, excellent customer service, real-time data analysis and reporting, and much more. And finally, it should also be possible to manage the content and customize the website in a flexible way as much as possible. So enough to chew on for us. Now, from the technical point of view, we knew that we were going to need more development capacity for a project of this size, and that our team would be expanding sooner rather than later. That is why we were very eager to work with the easiest way for developers of all levels to set up their development environments uniformly. So to make sure that everyone has the same development environment set up to avoid conflicts and problems there. So we heard from our stakeholders that with the current website, it was taking increasingly more time to add new features to the current website. So we wanted to focus on keeping the development cycle as short as possible for an extended period of time. So to make sure that our workflow wouldn't clog up in the course of months, for example. So we want to do something really solid there. Because the new e-commerce application was going to be bigger than its predecessor, test-driven development became even more important to us than it already was. And we wanted to be able to separate concerns in the sense that the web application would become impossibly big if it would contain all the required functionality within itself. Think of a warehouse management system, reporting tools, and a lot. After receiving the database schema of the current website, we took a note that we should keep an eye on the data model of candidate e-commerce platforms to build upon. That helped us a lot with data migrations and building a system that supports orders with multiple shipments, payments, returns, each with their own status codes, and products with various properties, attributes, options, and variants. So within the larger scope of our organization, in addition to BALR, we also have 433, big football news and fun platform, One-Halves, the lifestyle platform you might know from the 90s, I think, or early 2000s. We have done all kinds of projects, and that's the main reason that our development team had evolved to comprise of mostly all-round developers and not e-commerce specialists per se. That is why we decided to kick off the project with a proof of concept phase, where we compared several e-commerce platforms according to the following dimensions. So very soon we realized that an important criterion for us was, does the online demo actually work? I mean, it's unimaginable how many online demos are broken. How painful is it to install locally? How quickly can you set it up on your local machine? Is it easy to deploy anywhere? How much effort does it cost to add a custom admin module? We tried it with Magento. Was not a nice experience. Does it support internationalization? Very crucial one. Some solutions lack it. What's in place for customizing the front end? Can we use less, stuff like that, or are we first forced to use only SAS, or even just throw in some CSS as only option? There are many differences there too. Is there quality documentation available, and is there an active community? Use variation there too, and does it have a built-in API? Might come in handy if you want to split out your shop into, for example, a JavaScript front end or a native app front end, for example. Among others, we tried out Magento, also Shopify, OpenCart, PrestaShop, even OS Commerce. Apparently it still exists today. And eventually we ended up building on top of Cilius, an open source e-commerce platform based on Symfony. It almost reached stable at the time we started, so we thought, well, we can go with it. It will reach stable soon anyway, and we'll be fine. It has reached stable by now, but unfortunately, by virtue of actually dropping most basic shop functionality instead of pushing for perfection, we were also very disappointed to learn that something, in our opinion, crucial, like supporting Symfony 3, was postponed to way after the 1.0 launch, in favor of adding a bunch of opinionated JavaScript sauce. So to stay on track, we more or less forked the project and ended up with a mostly custom Symfony-based webshop. Scrum has been the workflow of choice in our organization for most previous projects. Our stakeholders have been trained in Scrum for IT projects for several years now, by me mostly. Based on their experience with Scrum, though, they expected to see some results very early on. Keep in mind that we already did this prototyping phase. So we had to convince them to take even more time for preparations, because we felt like we needed to set up the DevOps workflow of our dreams. And that's more or less what we did. And that turned out to be a great choice. So our new developers, sitting here in front, got their first pull request merged on their first day working at BALR, with tests run automatically and the updated application deployed automatically to our test server. The pressure behind the project can be stressful enough as it is, and we are glad that we hardly had to mix in any DevOps work into our sprint backlogs. We have experience with that with products from the past, and not having to worry about DevOps stories intermixed with our business logic stories helps us to focus on that business logic and keep our velocity high. Let me go into some more detail about our continuous integration and continuous delivery setup. An important reason for us to choose Cilius was its extensive BDD and CI setup, so behavior-driven development and continuous integration setup. Cilius has an example setup, of course, for their own project, for Travis CI, that we could reuse. Now, in the past, some of you may have had a similar experience. We had CI jobs taking forever as the suites grew bigger with the project. Cilius provides at least two solutions for this problem. First, it leverages custom dependency injection scopes with rigorous caching where possible. Second, Cilius provides an elegant way of running only suites for which code has been changed, using a shell script that checks for git log output to see what files have been changed in a commit, and only runs the corresponding suites. And of course, you can turn that on and off depending on whether you're integrating for deployment to your testing server or production server. But that's a pretty great feature. So one of the few things we had to change in Travis was the packaging and deployment of the application after running the tests. We use Behead for behavior-driven development on the story level, and we use PHP spec for spec level BDD. We use PHP unit mainly for functional testing. Like, so who of the people here still have a dedicated in-house sysadmin in their company? Raise your hands. Not so many. Yeah, neither do we. We don't have one, so we were looking for enterprise-grade, feature-rich hosting as a service. And we wanted to automate as many system administration tasks as possible, but still be in control. The obvious candidates, of course, are services from companies like Amazon Web Services, AWS, and Azure by Microsoft. So is there anyone here who prefers Azure over AWS in this room? No one. Excellent. So anyone preferring AWS? Yeah. Yeah, we prefer AWS too. We've used it in other projects we did in the past. So we went with it. So unfortunately, as you all might know, the AWS documentation does not really take you by the hand, to say the least, right? So it took us a couple of weeks, actually, of trial and error to get the desired result. And this is something that I learned talking to many developers, that there's a problem in many companies, actually, to get, so usually at some point during the road, this setup takes too long, and people go with an inferior solution because they get how to do that. But just going the extra mile can prove to be really difficult. At least that's my experience and what I hear many other companies struggle with at times. So we arrived at AWS, then what? Googling Docker, AWS, what do you get? OpsWorks with Docker, Elastic Beanstalk with Docker, BALR ECS with Docker. What are you going to pick? So for reasons that are even hard to remember, because we made this decision like almost a year ago already, and well, a huge factor, as I mentioned, is trial and error. We ended up with Elastic Beanstalk. So there we were. So how do you set it up? Different options if you get into Elastic Beanstalk with your PHP application that you would like to deploy. So we had to make sure that when creating an environment for our Elastic Beanstalk application, we had to make sure to not select PHP, not select multi-container Docker. And by the way, we tried all of those out, like which one worked best. We ended up using single container Docker there. So Elastic Beanstalk configured with single container Docker allows us to fully automate deployments for every change in the application code uploaded by Travis CI. Run database migrations and asset compilation, etc. Automatically on deployment. And automatically rebuild the Docker image if we made changes to it before a deployment. So even though we are using the same Dockerfile in development and production, we actually use multi-container Docker, Docker Compose in development, while we use single container Docker in production. And the main reason is that AWS already has so much infrastructure in place ready to use that it doesn't really make sense to connect our Nginx PHP FPM container to yet another database container. while we can leverage RDS and security groups within AWS. Much more solid, less error prone, and more secure, in our opinion. In development, we have to start from scratch, though, building something up. We do this by using dlight on our MacBooks, which works faster for us than any other means of using Docker on a Mac. Then we run Docker Compose up to run the Nginx PHP FPM, MariaDB, and Redis service. Then SSH into the PHP container, run composer install, and all we have to do to run the website in a local development setup is load the fixtures, and you're done. Or without loading the fixtures, we can also run the migrations in the Symfony test environment and start testing right away. So that's development. But there's no more custom work we do on AWS than configuring the web server using Docker and making sure the application code is loaded inside it. So keeping things simple like this allows us to automate this process entirely. The only manual labor involved is a one-time configuration of RDS, S3, CloudFront, Redis, Elasticache, you name it. But the beauty of Elastic Beanstalk is that such manual labor is minimized by the feature it provides to clone your environments. So this saves us a lot of time and headache related to setting up, testing, acceptance, production environments with the same architecture. So as I briefly mentioned, Travis CI has a deployment provider for Elastic Beanstalk, really easy to use. And this allows us to have our application automatically built, zipped, and uploaded to Elastic Beanstalk. So with regards to monitoring, we use New Relic. Pretty great how New Relic infrastructure integrates with Docker running on EC2 on Amazon AWS. And New Relic provided us with swift and effective support with installing the required software on our EC2 instances as well as inside our Docker containers. So it was a bit scary at first, like, oh, how are we going to set all this up with our slightly complex setup. But then, if you just give them a call, it makes everything so simple. And it's super great. So New Relic allows us to visualize the CPU and RAM uses of individual processes running inside the containers in all EC2 instances. In addition, a simple plugin allows you to visualize metrics about EC2, RDS, Elasticache that is already available in your AWS dashboard, but then all in one and the same place in your New Relic dashboard. And as you might know, also alerts and request errors and timing of requests and subtiming of requests, like PHP operations, request queuing, it's all there. So that works. So even though we are super stoked about our setup, there are still some challenges that we need to face. We use Grunt to process front-end assets during development. And a challenge we face at times is that file syncing between the host and the Docker container is sometimes slow. As a consequence, the file watcher running inside the container It does not always detect file system changes immediately, which can be impeding for front-end development sometimes. So another thing is that by default, Elastic Beanstalk is configured to perform health checks against the robots.txt file. The health check gauges whether a to-be-deployed environment is ready to be swapped with the existing one. And we have some commands that need to be run after a deployment is ready to generate some files on the fly after robots.txt has already become available. And this can lead to a temporarily broken site, like lacking styling, for instance, which is not what we want. But not all, you can change the file to perform health checks against in your Elastic Beanstalk configuration dashboard. But not all dynamically created files have a fixed file name. For example, for the purpose of cache busting. So we are still looking for the cleanest way to check the health, to check the right file to gauge the health of the server before Elastic Beanstalk swaps the staged environment with the live environment. Third one is that it's a less technical one, but a challenge nonetheless. Is that even though it seems there are infinite possibilities to mix and match all the services and technologies available today into a setup that matches our business's needs, and it sometimes feels like we're the only team in the world working like this, because like the more specific you go, the harder your problems become to Google a solution for. We may have been reinventing the wheel here and there, and it's a disadvantage of our strategy to focus on building an in-house team, and especially in the early stage of a big project like this, not wanting to rely too much on the expertise of external developers and specialists. So we are very pleased to get new developers up and running in an hour or so with Docker and Delight. It's bliss. And we're also very happy that we did extensive prototyping. So starting from scratch on a big project. We found out that when you're looking for technologies to build upon, your closest friends will be super eager to sell you a product that you don't need. And for us, it worked out to convince our stakeholders to plan a proof of concept prototyping phase to check existing solutions against our own requirements. But keep in mind that after that, it may still take some persuasion to make sure that your stakeholders will follow up on your advice. But we're happy that our stakeholders are good listeners. So another thing that went great is after the prototyping phase, not rushing into sprints too soon, but we took the time to complete a solid DevOps workflow. And it was more than worth the time investment, because being able to focus fully on business logic during the sprinting phase greatly increased our development speed, for sure. We automated as many processes as possible, but we only customized our setup up to the point where existing services could take over to avoid time lost on over-engineering stuff yourself. We took the time to set up the test systems in the most scalable way possible to our knowledge. And as you might know, it can be quite stressful to run into these bottlenecks of your testing setup as your application and test suites grow over the course of a couple of months. But so far, everything has been running like a dream for almost a year. So to wrap up and leave some time for questions for Tom. So our advice is to really take the time to set up a new project with the tools you think are the absolute best for the situation at that time. It can make stakeholders nervous at the start of the project, but all will be forgotten when they see you accelerating toward the expected result and beyond. I would like to take a brief moment to thank some people, Ralph, Jules, and Dami, our most active stakeholders, for pulling me aboard this awesome company, BALR, and putting so much trust in the learning potential of developers and giving the development team so much responsibility to make autonomous decisions about the best technologies and workflows to put to use in their projects. Would like to briefly thank my wife Olga and my mother Elia for their faith in me, care and patience, and my seafood Johnny Mosquita from Sombong Concepts for helping me to kickstart my developer career. And last but not least, would like to thank Team BALR on the picture to the right, sitting here in front. Tom, of course, especially. And not only the IT department, but also the marketing, sales, finance, legal, HR, customer service, warehouse departments, and the BALR store crew. And thank you for listening. Oh, and it might come as a surprise, but we are always looking for new talent for a bunch of roles, technical as well as non-technical. So if you're interested, check out our career page, or maybe you know someone who might be interested. Anyway, don't hesitate to get in touch. Thank you. So, are there any questions? Yes.
You were the first back there. Well, probably this is our biggest challenge right now. So I just killed my Docker setup yesterday by running grunt. It just died. I had to restart my Mac. But Docker is using NFS to share the file system or the files to the container itself. And yeah, NFS is good for a lot of things, but really not good for constantly or frequently changing files. So we're not there yet, but we need to solve this soon. Until then, we just manually run the grunt command line instead of using the file fetcher. So that's all we can do for now. There was someone.
Yeah, I think I can say that in production, we're using one container which has all of the applications, and in development you're using separate containers. So database and everything is in one container in production?
No, the container in production only runs the web server. So we rely on Amazon's infrastructure and their knowledge for the database. The automatic failover setup and everything is covered by Amazon RDS. And also we use Redis Elasticache, which is also an Amazon service. We just don't want to, and obviously you cannot compete with something that big and established already. So we rely on them in these things.
So then the other question I was curious, within your application, do you have any user-land files? You have to have volumes that you mount that have to persist between deployments of different container page, so images and that sort of thing?
Yeah, we store in development. For example, the product images are stored in the file system, just in a directory, which is then shared with the Docker container. But in production, we use S3, and then we use CloudFront, used in front of S3 to provide CDN, so faster performance, and provide faster access to the images from all over the world. And also we use S3 to store configuration files which are shared across the instances. And also each Elastic Beanstalk environment has its own S3 bucket. So they know that these are our files or my files. There was someone here also with a question. Yeah. On which part? Because security as a mindset is kind of part of our culture, so we are enforcing it or repeating it to our juniors all the time, that this is very important, that you need to put into consideration that if you put something online, it will be attacked. Luckily, we have someone who's really interested in security concerns and knows about all the exploits and the most recent hackings we just experienced. But which part are you interested in? Because it's a really broad subject in this case. Well, first and foremost, Elastic Beanstalk and the ECS2 instances are behind Amazon's firewall. So yet again, we ourselves didn't want to invest in learning how to set up a firewall correctly. Amazon does it for us. It has also a load balancer, which probably we didn't mention. But I think the best security thing you can do is just not opening up anything to the world. And in our case, it's only the web port. Only the HTTPS and the HTTP ports are open to the world. Everything else is behind security groups and limited to IPs and passwords and the two-factor Amazon authentication, etc. So that's mostly it. Any questions more? Someone? Yep. I'm sorry, what was the last part? Well, one thing we recently ran into that we wanted to have a maintenance page, and you can just have a static website, so you cannot point Elastic Beanstalk to, for example, an S3 static website, but we had to set up or create a separate environment for the maintenance, because then Elastic Beanstalk just can swap the URLs, so we could switch back and forth between maintenance within seconds. But we had to figure out how to create basically a small container with just static content in it for maintenance purposes, or displaying our visitors that, we are working on it. Anybody else? Yeah.
So you mentioned that you perhaps forgot why you made the decision for Elastic Beanstalk versus base ECS, because it was nearly a year ago. Maybe do you remember what the factors were?
Well, Elastic Beanstalk kind of binds together multiple services. I think that was the biggest reason. So it has a load balancer, it has its own database configuration, held in one configuration blob. It also eases for you to use environment variables and pass them into all the hosts you fire up behind in the background, and also has a lot of tools for helping you to configure rolling updates out of the box, so you don't have to do it yourself. It also has schedules for upscaling or throwing in more boxes when you have a peak load. Like when we had a TV show about Dami, who's one of the founders of an ex-football player, the load on our service went up just sky high. And we had boxes scheduled to cover that load. with Amazon, and also has automatic configuration for this. So you can even configure Elastic Beanstalk to automatically throw in more boxes as it experiences more traffic. I also wanted to say that if you have any questions later or you run into problems, just drop us a line. Tom@BALR.com, Jesse@BALR.com. And if you're looking for a job, drop us 2 lines.
Yeah, another great thing about Elastic Beanstalk is that you can still drill down like on the to the server level and tweak stuff on an individual server if you would like to do so. But the only reason we do that in our testing environment is, for example, to SSH into a box to retrieve some logs. But apart from that, there is no actual need for us to go that deep into the system. But yeah, the fact that it is possible is, yeah, for us is like a major advantage over using something like Heroku or something which is completely shielded.
Any more questions? Yeah.
Are you using Relic for the monitoring tool, or you can get statistics of all the requests? And are you running the Relic inside the container, or are you doing it?
That's a good question. We have both the application monitoring for the PHP part and the infrastructure monitoring for the servers part or the instances part. And yeah, that was fun to set up because you basically have to tell Amazon that create configuration files inside the container and run them to start up the processes for the New Relic daemons, which basically then communicate with the New Relic website. But it's inside the instance. I wouldn't swear on my mom that it's inside the container, but
yes, it is. Yeah, also inside the container. So it's a two-way installation, which was kind of tricky in advance to wrap our heads around. But in the end, when we contacted support, it was usually done in a jiffy.
Yeah, but they see inside the container for sure. So you can filter which process is running on the container or the host. I think we're running out of time a little bit, or
Yeah, we have 3 minutes
Oh,
for
okay.
additional questions.
I've got one question about New Relic. When your system scales up, when you've got a huge amount of traffic, how does the cost, I mean, because you pay per host, how does the cost work with New Relic? Because my experience is New Relic can be really expensive.
Yeah.
You can choose your destiny with that. You can do like a computations-based plan or an instances-based plan. But because we're continuously deploying new versions of the application and our server boxes are swapped in and out constantly, like a plan based on the number of instances you use is basically impossible. So yeah, we are basically doomed to using the computations based plan. And yeah, we'll have to wait and see like how that's going to add up.
yeah, it was a little bit cryptic for us as
Yeah.
well. Yeah, but we told them what our configurations and you know what we can see in the future that we will need about this amount of boxes, and then they came up with this recommendation that we should buy this amount of computing units or what they are called. But probably you're better off contacting them directly than me, maybe. Yeah. Another good question. You can configure Elastic Beanstalk to do either of them. I think there are 3 different ways. One is immutable, when it basically, if you have 4 hosts running, then it will fire up 4 new hosts and then swap them in the load balancer at once. Or you can have basically just normal deployment is just done, starts up new ones, or the rolling ones what we use, which basically means that you always have at least one instance or the configured number of minimum instances running. And it will fire up new instances, and when the health checks, what Jesse was talking about, report, yeah, I'm okay, then it configures it behind the load balancer, so basically it picks up the load. And then when the number of configured hosts is reached, then it shuts down the old ones. You have to keep that in mind, yes, when you're doing database migrations.
So
yes.
then you would use the immutable
Yes.
type. So if you know that you're going to do a backwards compatibility breaking schema update, then be sure to reconfigure Elastic Beanstalk to immutable
Yeah.
updates. Yes.
Yeah.
If
You can change the configuration anytime, and within a few minutes, the next deployment will work in the changed way.
Okay, I think we reached the end of the time box. Thank you for all your great questions, and thank you for listening. If there's anything else you want to know, feel free to contact us via any medium. And thanks again for your attention.